I got to farm with my dad every day. It's a way of life. It's a wonderful way of life. And it's at risk. It shouldn't be.
The impact of Trump's tariffs is being felt in the heartland.
Soybean farmers here are now suffering economically like they haven't in decades.
Right now, we are harvesting soybeans in Marengo, Illinois. My family has been farming since 1846. I'm the fifth generation. We're a grain operation. We grow corn, soybeans. I am a product of the pioneers. It's history. You don't let that go. One of the best memories that I had was just my dad teaching me how to drive a tractor. I got to farm with my dad every day. It was pretty cool.
$12.6 billion. That's how much China spent on American soybeans in 2024. This year, zero. Not one soybean sold. The result? Farmers facing bankruptcy, states running out of money, and the people who voted for the tariffs that caused this mess now begging for government bailouts. We're watching the American soybean industry collapse in real time. $20 billion in losses, entire state budgets crumbling, and the same folks who spent years screaming about no handouts are now standing in line with their hands out. This is what happens when ideology meets economics, when tough talk crashes into basic arithmetic, when you destroy your biggest customer and act shocked when they don't come back. Today we're breaking down the farmer bailout crisis, how we got here, who's really profiting, and what it teaches us about making decisions based on feelings instead of facts. Welcome back to Mind Mirror. Let's dive in.
Hey MAGA, did you hear that Donald Trump and his tariffs are absolutely decimating the soybean industry in this country? Yeah, our main buyer of soybeans is China, and because of the tariffs, they haven't bought a single one all year. This isn't hurting China, they're getting their soybeans from somewhere else. This is hurting American farmers. To the tune that Donald Trump wants to give them a $10 billion bailout. How does socialism sound now? Because the longer this goes on, China's not going to come back to the table. They're going to get used to getting their soybeans cheaper from somewhere else. And they ain't going to want to deal with the American system anymore. So congratulations, MAGA. You elected a man that bankrupted casinos, and now he's going to bankrupt the breadbasket of America. And the worst part about it is, this isn't the first time it happened. It happened during his last administration. And the people that were affected by it then, 77% of them still voted for him again. And those of you that did, no bailouts. You deserve what you get.
Hold on. I get the frustration, but you deserve what you get is too simple. Yeah, 77% of farmers who got crushed by tariffs in 2018 voted the same way again. That's infuriating to watch. But these aren't idiots. They're desperate people who made emotional decisions. For decades, rural America got abandoned. Towns died. Jobs left. Then someone shows up and says, I see you. I'll fight for you. That message? Powerful enough to override common sense. The real villains aren't the farmers. It's the politicians who knew the tariffs would fail, knew farmers would suffer, but sold them anyway because it sounded tough on TV. Farmers are casualties of betrayal. They voted based on promises that were lies. That's not stupidity. That's trust being weaponized against them.
I don't know why this is not getting enough attention, but China just completely stopped buying soy from the US and is now buying it from Brazil and Argentina. And let's just put things on perspective. Last year, China bought $12 billion on soy from the US, which is enough to fill 20 football stadiums full of soy, okay? And because, you guessed it, because of the tariffs, now they are buying from Brazil and Argentina. And let's just remember that the US bought a chunk of Argentina's death. And quickly after that, Argentina dropped the soy exportation tax fees, making it more accessible for China to buy from Argentina, which, by the way, I'm not mad that they're buying from them, but just to put things in perspective, now the farmers in the US are stuck with unsold crops, with death, and a lot of them have had to close their farms. Yep. Anyways, follow for more news.
What are all those starving soybean farmers in the Midwest going to do with the 55 billion pounds of soybeans that China's not buying this year? I know Iowa is going to go nuts for making their own soy milk, and I know that Arkansas is going to go nuts for tofu. I'm sure they're going to love their own homemade miso in Indiana, and I know those North Dakotans are going to love soy yogurt. In Missouri, they can send their kids to school with some whole roasted soybeans for snack and then make their own veggie burgers for lunch and dinner. I have never met a person in the Midwest or the South that doesn't love a good veggie burger. Have you? And no more Baskin-Robbins on a hot summer day in Wisconsin. You won't need your healthy cows because you can make your very own soy ice cream. And it doesn't stop there. Are you going to be cold this winter and you can't afford your heating bill, but you have a ton of extra soybeans, literally? Well, just simply learn how to make your own spray foam insulation with soybeans. Maybe they can make their own biodiesel too. That doesn't sound complicated at all. See, you don't need to blame others. You can just pull yourself up by your own soybeans. Or you could have voted for Kamala, but I guess she had a funny laugh, right?
Oof. That hits different because it's absolutely true. Farmers had a choice between someone offering actual rural policy, broadband, farm support, climate programs, and someone whose policies already destroyed them once. And they chose the laugh, the vibes, the personality. Here's what's wild. Farmers are practical about everything except politics. They'll research seed varieties for hours, calculate margins to the penny, fix their own equipment to save money. But voting? Pure emotion. He talks like us. She's too polished. I don't like her smile. Meanwhile, their farms are circling the drain because the policies they voted for based on feelings are destroying them based on facts. Next time, vote like your livelihood depends on it, because it literally does.
China was the largest importer of soybeans from the United States, totaling about $12.6 billion in 2024. And how many soybeans have they imported this year from the U.S.? 0. Trump is unwilling to play nice in the sandbox with China, and it has resulted in the country divesting all of its interest in the soybean industry in the United States and looking elsewhere. And where is that elsewhere? Well, one of those places is Argentina. And what has Donald Trump and his administration decided to do with this competitor to the U.S. soybean farming industry? Well, he's decided to give them a $20 billion bailout. So let's summarize this. Donald Trump has caused the soybean industry to lose their largest international customer. That international customer has gone to Argentina, where Donald Trump has bailed out Argentina. And he's also offered a $20 billion bailout to the farming industry for an issue he caused. Let's not sugarcoat the fact that a bailout is a fancy word for a handout. I thought Republicans didn't believe in handouts. That's socialism. So why are these farmers holding their hands out asking for help?
Right? The irony is suffocating. Socialism is evil, no handouts, pull yourself up by your bootstraps until their farms start failing. Then suddenly it's, where's our bailout? The government needs to help us. It's selective capitalism. I believe in the free market as long as it doesn't hurt me. And let's talk about who really benefits from these bailouts. That $15 billion in farm aid, it doesn't stay with farmers. It flows straight through to John Deere, seed companies, chemical suppliers. Farmer gets enough to survive one more season. Corporations get record profits. And here's the trap. Individual farmers can't even refuse on principle, because if you don't take the money, you're competing against everyone who did. Your costs stay inflated. You're playing a rigged game. So the cycle continues. Policies destroy markets, farmers struggle, corporations lobby for bailouts, and the money flows through farmers' hands into corporate accounts. Farmers aren't being saved, they're being used.
I don't think that the farmers that are currently complaining to Republican representatives in the Trump administration quite realize the pickle that they're in when they're complaining about not having enough people because of deportations. Eventually, that's no longer going to be a very helpful narrative for Republicans to allow to continue. And those farmers who previously hired illegal immigrants are going to suddenly have the IRS coming to knock going, hey, let's take a look at that paperwork for your employees. And suddenly all those farmers are going to have a choice to either just go mum about the whole thing, or be examples for other Republicans of why it is you don't speak out.
This is where it gets truly dark. You're a farmer, crops rotting, can't find workers because of deportations, going bankrupt. So you complain to your representatives. Then it hits you. If I admit I can't find workers, I'm admitting I hired undocumented workers, which means tax audits, fines, criminal charges. Now you're trapped. Can't run your farm without labor. Can't complain about losing labor without confessing you broke the law. This is probably by design. The last thing politicians want is their base publicly complaining. Bad for ratings. Solution? Scare people into silence. A few high-profile audits, a few examples made. Everyone else shuts up. Farmers are learning loyalty only flows one direction. They supported these policies, defended them, voted for them, and now they're disposable.
You won't hear this from anyone but me, but the Missouri Farm Bureau endorsed every politician running in Missouri who supports Trump's tariffs and his trade war that is absolutely decimating Missouri soybean farmers. And if you don't believe me, here's the list. From the Missouri Farm Bureau page, there are 24 election endorsements: Josh Hawley, Ann Wagner, Mark Alford, Sam Graves, Eric Burleson, Jason Smith, and Mike Kehoe. Every one of those politicians is doing the bidding of Trump. They're all Republicans. The Missouri Farm Bureau is supposed to be nonpartisan. It's weird, though, because they only endorse Republicans. Now they have endorsed the people who have destroyed the farms in Missouri. I wish people would wake up about the Farm Bureau. They're an insurance company. They're not standing up for small farmers. They're doing the bidding of Republican donors. They hurt farmers.
Because of ongoing tariffs, U.S. soybean farmers have lost $12.6 billion so far. Harvest is going on, but they feel like they're not going to get any profit this year. Moreover, they're waiting for government bailout, but because of the government shutdown, even that's getting delayed. Farmer Blake Hurst, former president of Missouri Farm Bureau, has called Trump's tariff a complete bust. More than the bailout, he wants Trump to drop the tariff and continue the normal trade relations. Until the shutdown ends, these farmers are not going to get their bailout, and they will continue to deal with heartache of losing money and not making any profits on their work. It's sad because people overlook farmers and some blue-collar workers in this country, but they are the backbone of the economy.
Stop the mockery for a second. This deserves respect. Farmers are the backbone, literally. Without people growing food, society collapses. Everything else is window dressing. And they have been ignored. Democrats abandoned them. Republicans used them for photo ops. Economists celebrated globalization while their communities died. So when someone finally said, "I see you, I value you, I'll fight for you," of course they listened. The tragedy isn't that farmers believed. The tragedy is they were so starved for recognition they believed someone who was obviously lying. They needed leaders who understood agriculture, trade, economics. Instead, they got slogans and policies that destroyed their industry. Now they're drowning in debt, losing their land, and the people who promised to save them, gone. Rural America deserved real solutions, not performance art, and we all failed them. He's absolutely right. This farmer just explained the entire scam. The bailouts aren't for farmers. They're for the corporations that sell to farmers. Government announces $15 billion in farm aid. Sounds great, right? Helping the little guy? But watch where it goes. John Deere sells a $750,000 tractor. Seed companies charge $300 per bag. Everyone keeps prices inflated because they know farmers just got a check. The farmer gets barely enough to survive. The corporations get rich. And the sickest part? Individual farmers can't boycott on principle. If you refuse the bailout, you still compete against everyone who took it. Your costs stay high. Your neighbors got subsidized. You lose either way. The government isn't picking winners and losers. They're making sure corporations always win and farmers always lose. Nobody talks about it because the system works exactly as designed.
Without them providing us with food, water supplies, doesn't matter how much we make, this country wouldn't be able to survive.
We're watching democracy fall in real time. Fighting for your freedom is brutal, it's exhausting, and it is dangerous. And freedom has never been won from the comfort of a couch. I hope that besides getting on your platform and yelling that we're not coming outside, that you're doing other things to help, like boycotting, mutual aid, grassroots organizing, and you're using your platform to encourage others to do the same thing. But make sure you're doing something and stop acting like your apathy is activism. We are not our ancestors. I used to hate that saying because it's disrespectful, but now I get it because our ancestors were brave. They were built different. And some of y'all are built like your ancestors because a lot of y'all had cowards for ancestors. And it shows. My ancestors were way too badass. I already know that I do not measure up, even though I practically live outside. But we are living through our government being taken over. Hiding in fear won't save you and has never won a battle. And it will not win you your freedom either. So if you're too scared to come outside, Fine, we heard you the first 50 times you said it. Cool, stay inside because the rest of us are working. But I will say that I believe that the people who put us in this mess need to be on the front lines.
Soybean farmer leaders were in Houston, Texas late in September to present a ceremonial check for $275,000 to the Andersons, Inc. The funding supports an expansion project for the Port of Houston that will boost soybean meal export capacity. This project is expected to be completed in the first quarter of 2026 and will allow the facility to begin exporting soybean meal for the first time. The investment is part of a broader strategy by U.S. soybean farmers to strengthen international market access. With new soybean processing plants coming online across the country to meet rising demand for renewable fuels, more soybean oil is being produced, and that means more soybean meal as a byproduct.
Did you hear? Us soybean farmers, we're going to get $15 billion. Let's just have a party and celebrate, right? No, let me explain why I, as a soybean farmer, don't care for any of these government programs, whether it's the current bailout being discussed, or will be if the government ever reopens, who cares, or the supplemental disaster relief program, or whatever other one-off program that the government comes up with to bail out the farmers. It's not us asking for it. The farmers that I know or talk to and see on social media aren't the ones that want these programs. Let me explain. If you rely on farmers to do business, you probably want the farmers to have money, right? The agricultural input industry has a massive lobby in the United States, and they're the ones pushing for this program. If you're an equipment manufacturer, you're a seed company, you're a chemical manufacturer, you're a fertilizer supplier, heck, if you're a big landowner, you need the farmers to have money to buy your products. It's not us that wants it. This is all coming from the ag input suppliers trying to keep their prices artificially higher so that they can make their money, and the farmers will be the ones that take the fall if they got the bailout. You think the government is going to write a check to the manufacturer of this green combine? No, not a chance. But if they write thousands of checks to the farmers and then we go and spend our money with them, they can charge $750,000 for a tractor instead of being reasonable, right? Same thing with the seed companies. Why are we paying $300 a bag for seed corn? Well, because we can, apparently, and they know that we can. If the government would stay out of these things and not give away this kind of money on a large scale, everything would be better off for the farmers. Now, I know some of you are already typing, well, just don't take the money, right? Wrong. That doesn't work. Because if I stand on principle and say we aren't going to take this money, but they give it to everybody else, all of my inputs are still way up here. They're still high, right? It still costs me a huge amount for equipment, for fertilizer, for seed, for all of the other things that we have to buy. And all of my neighbors now have that money. Neighbors meaning the guy next door, the farmers in Iowa, halfway across the country. They can all afford to do it because they took the government payout, the government bailout money, and I didn't. Either nobody gets it or everybody does. The government should not pick winners and losers. I don't like any of it, but I can't just not take it. You guys with me? Am I right or wrong here? You can tell me if I'm wrong.
This is textbook gaslighting in action. They said tariffs will help farmers. Reality, markets destroyed. They said we're fighting for agriculture. Reality, record bankruptcies. They said wait for the bailout. Reality, government shut down, so farmers can't even access their loans. This isn't incompetence. This is manipulation as policy. The bailouts themselves, not solutions. They're bribes. Here's some money. Stop complaining. Vote for us again. Don't ask questions. But the money doesn't fix lost export markets, higher costs, or labor shortages. It's a band-aid on a bullet wound. Smart farmers see this. They know they're being used. Know these are political payoffs, not economic fixes. But what choice do they have? Take the money and survive another season, or stand on principle and lose everything. That's not policy. That's hostage-taking.
If you're a farmer and still support Trump, you are a victim of gaslighting. Let's look at the definition, shall we? Gaslighting, the practice of psychologically manipulating someone into questioning their own sanity, memory, or powers of reasoning. I don't know about y'all, But these farmer bailouts that are about to come out, prime evidence of gaslighting. We've been told the tariffs will help. We've been told that he's so good for agriculture. If he's so good for ag, why have we lost so much demand that he's already over here saying, here's $10 billion worth of bailouts after we already got the Biden bucks? Because big ag and the people who own farm debt are lobbying for these payments. Don't get me wrong, some of these payments are going to be make or break for some producers this year. And I'm not talking just like your 20-acre producer, your 500-acre producer. I'm talking your couple 1,000-acre producer. Pretty okay size depending on what state you're in, okay? South Dakota, 2,000 acres is pretty solid. But you know who's going to benefit from it most? All the big farmers are going to make much more than any of the little guys. However, big ag is going to benefit from it most because they own the farm debt. The really sad thing, though, is that this shouldn't even be about Republican versus Democrat. This should be about policy and how do we improve our ag economy. Fighting the wrong battle by fucking picking people who don't help us, not bailing us out. That's not what I'm talking about with help, but people who just stay out of our markets. Why is that so hard? We need to understand that agriculture benefits from free trade. And if we are doing something that is completely adverse to free trade, we are hurting American farmers. This doesn't need to be Trump v. Biden. This doesn't need to be Republican versus Democrat. This needs to be look at the facts. Let's have a conversation and let's understand how the economics of our industry actually work so that we can start voting specifically for people who are going to make sure that they at least put in policies that don't interrupt our profitability or shut the government down so that any of us that have FSA loans can't even write a check.
Harsh but accurate. China won because they understood basic economics. When tariffs hit, China didn't panic or beg. They called Brazil, called Argentina, signed long-term contracts, done. American farmers didn't understand. You can't punish someone who has options. China needed soybeans, sure, but they didn't need American soybeans. They just needed soybeans. So now we've got farmers sitting on billions worth of crops they can't sell, while Brazilian farmers are thriving with Chinese money that used to be ours. And China's not coming back. Why would they? They've got stable suppliers now. No political drama, no tariff threats, just reliable business. Trade wars prove one thing. When you destroy your relationship with your biggest customer, they move on. And they don't come back just because you suddenly need them. That's not politics. That's just how markets work. And markets don't care about your feelings.
It's harvest season in the Midwest. Wheat, corn, soybeans, they're all booming. But instead of celebrating, farmers are now facing what some are calling farmageddon. Why? Their biggest buyer, China, isn't buying anything. Thanks to President Trump's trade wars, US farmers are locked out of their top markets. Soybeans are America's top crop, $24 billion in exports last year. China used to buy half. Now, zero. They're turning to Brazil and Argentina, more stable partners. Meanwhile, farmers are getting squeezed by rising costs. Fertilizer, potash, equipment, all more expensive due to tariffs. Sound familiar? Well, back in 2018, Trump slapped on tariffs and farm profits plummeted. He bailed them out with $28 billion. And when the pandemic hit, the money kept coming. Now, he's floating another $10 billion. But details have been slim. Meanwhile, farm subsidies this year are already over $40 billion. That's the second highest since 1933. But farmers want to sell their crops, not rely on government handouts. Meanwhile, Trump is pledging $20 billion to help Argentina, a direct competitor. Even Republican Senator Chuck Grassley has asked, why bail out Argentina while American farmers suffer? Farmers have been among Trump's most loyal supporters. He says he's their best friend, but the only thing that's growing is anger.
So American farmers who were once proudly waving the MAGA flag are now waving their hands in distress for help. And we're the ones that have to bail them out. Trump breaks something, blames someone else, and then we have to fix it with our taxpayer money. And now China's getting their crops from Brazil. How does this make sense? China has won the war. China won the trade war. End of story.
And there it is. The first domino. Nebraska can't pay its bills. Not struggling. Can't pay. $2 billion in soybean contracts canceled. $350 million in state tax revenue gone. Nebraska's not alone. Iowa, Kansas, South Dakota, all staring at the same cliff. Here's the death spiral. Farmers don't sell crops, don't buy equipment, don't hire workers, don't spend in communities, businesses close, tax revenue disappears, state services collapse, young people leave, repeat. This is how entire regions die, slowly, painfully, and the federal government that caused this with tariffs, too busy fighting to help. Meanwhile, there's somehow $20 billion for Argentina, a direct competitor to American farmers. We're bailing out the competition while our farmers go bankrupt and our states go broke. The first domino fell. More are coming, and when they do, people will finally understand that trade wars have costs, real ones, and we're the ones paying them.
God, I miss Biden.
Donald Trump just attacked China's drop in soybean purchases on his Truth Social, calling it an economically hostile act and threatening to sever cooking oil trade. Here's what's missing from his post. China hasn't bought a single U.S. soybean this year. What was once billions in trade is now zero. In 2024, U.S. soy exports to China were around like 12 billion, 13 million, the backbone of many, many farm incomes. China shifted to Brazil and Argentina, cheaper, reliable producers, and it's gonna unlikely shift back. As for cooking oil, he says, Trump is probably speaking about the trade in used cooking oil. The U.S. imports a massive amount of it from China due to biofuel demand. But here's the thing. Used cooking oil import flows are already under pressure from new tariffs. This isn't about soybeans or oil. It's about narrative control. He's presenting a blunder as fealty and turning economic chaos into patriotic theater. So farmers, I don't know. Watch your backs.
It's Joe from Georgia. So we're getting ready for the first domino to fall, and we know what happens after the first one falls. Well, the state of Nebraska, the governor, Jim Pillen, has asked the federal government for help because they're not going to be able to pay their bills this year. And here's the problem in Nebraska. They had over a $2 billion contract with the Chinese government to export soybeans to China. Well, out of that $2 billion, they've canceled all the contracts. So out of that $2 billion, $350 million was state revenue taxes. They're not getting any of that. And the governor also goes on to say that because the migrant farmers weren't able to work in Nebraska this summer, that those people didn't pay their taxes either. And the farmers who already have crops in the ground, folks, they've already spent their money. They're going to need help too because they're not getting any money from the contracts anymore. So Nebraska is the first state. And when you look at the Midwest, you're probably looking at Kansas, you're looking at Iowa, South Dakota, all of those places that are large exporters of grains to China and depend on migrant farm labor. They're not going to be able to pay their bills either. So here's the first one to fall. But of course, as we do know, a certain person in a certain house in Washington, D.C. at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, they know all about bankruptcy. I'm sure they'll be able to help.